On June 18, 2020, after a decade of signing off on pristine financial reports, auditors at EY finally demanded direct proof of 1.9 billion euros sitting in 2 Philippine banks. The banks replied that the documents were forged, the money never existed, and within hours, Wirecard COO Jan Marsalek boarded a private jet in Austria, vanishing into the airspace of Belarus. How did a payment processor for offshore pornography and gambling use forged PDFs to hypnotize the German government, global auditors, and retail investors into believing it was Europe's invincible $30 billion answer to Silicon Valley? A machine built on gambling, a government protecting a lie, and a shadow network of Russian hackers. The $30 billion illusion is shattering. We are going to watch it break. As of August 2026, the architect of this empire sits in a Munich courtroom, fighting a marathon criminal trial that has consumed years, while his right-hand man lives under the protection of the Russian state. If the financial numbers were so obviously fabricated, why did Germany's top federal regulators threaten the whistleblowers instead of the executives? To understand how the trap was set, you have to look at what the trap was made of. Wirecard didn't start as a tech darling. In the early 2000s, it was the plumbing for the internet's dark alleys. If you ran an offshore casino or a sprawling porn network, traditional banks wouldn't touch your money. Wirecard would. For a steep fee, they processed the high-risk transactions the rest of the financial system ignored. It was a gritty, highly profitable cash cow, but Markus Braun wanted more. Braun had a pathological obsession with being perceived as a Steve Jobs-level visionary. He constructed a reality distortion field inside the Ashheim headquarters. He wrapped the company's seedy origins in the slick, impenetrable language of AI and blockchain. And the markets ate it up. Germany desperately wanted its own Silicon Valley titan, and Braun played the part perfectly. But beneath the tech jargon, Wirecard had a fatal problem. Its core business was bleeding money. By 2015, the gap between the visionary lie and the financial reality became too wide to bridge legally. Braun reached the point of no return. He authorized the creation of the TPA network, the third-party acquirer system. Wirecard claimed that in countries where it didn't have a banking license, it used local partners to process transactions. These partners supposedly took a cut and put Wirecard's massive profits into escrow accounts in Asia. It was a brilliantly opaque story. Let's look at how the machine was actually wired. Wirecard generated fake transaction data in Ashheim. They routed this fake data through shell companies in Dubai, Singapore, and Manila. These shadow partners then issued forged certificates confirming they held billions in profit. And the auditors at EY looked at the forged PDFs, stamped them as real, and certified Wirecard's staggering growth. By 2018, the illusion reached its absolute peak. Braun had engineered a miracle. Wirecard hit a 24 billion euro market cap. It physically evicted Commerzbank from the prestigious DAX 30 index. Markus Braun was officially a billionaire. Wirecard was the untouchable pride of the German economy. If you want to know how the most celebrated companies on earth hide their darkest secrets, built and broke in tears, one of these empires apart every week. Braun thought he had permanently won. But 6,000 miles away, a leak was about to break the dam. A whistleblower in Singapore had just sent a shadow accounting spreadsheet to a lone journalist at the Financial Times. The spreadsheet proved the profits were entirely fabricated. The empire was bleeding. When Dan McCrum published the FT investigations in early 2019, the market expected the German financial regulator, BaFin, to raid Wirecard. They expected handcuffs. They expected asset freezes. Instead, BaFin did the exact opposite. In an unprecedented move, the German regulators banned investors from short-selling Wirecard stock. Then they filed criminal complaints against the journalists. The state was actively shielding the fraud. And while BaFin guarded the front door, COO Jan Marsalek went to war out the back. Marsalek was not a normal executive. He was a man who bragged about his ties to foreign intelligence. To silence the escalating skepticism, he deployed a mercenary army. Marsalek hired Libyan militias. He paid Russian hackers to spearfish critics. He hired private detectives to stalk the Financial Times reporters across London, photographing them in secret. Was Markus Braun the mastermind of a $30 billion illusion, or just the useful idiot for a COO with deep ties to Russian intelligence? That question is why Built and Broken exists. If tracing the anatomy of a massive lie is why you're here, join us. Despite Marsalek's thugs, the public pressure on Wirecard was becoming unbearable. Investors were demanding answers. In early 2020, Braun made a fatal miscalculation. Arrogance overcame survival. To clear his name once and for all, Braun ordered a special, independent audit by KPMG. It was meant to be a rubber stamp. It was a suicide mission. Unlike EY, KPMG refused to accept blurry screenshots and promises from Marsalek's friends in Asia. They wanted to see original bank statements. Marsalek scrambled to forge them, but KPMG noted the delays, the excuses. In April 2020, KPMG published their report. They stated they could not verify that €1 billion in profit actually existed. The rubber stamp had failed. Braun had accidentally handed EY the map to a €1.9 billion black hole. Which brings us to June 2020, the climax. With the KPMG disaster public, EY could no longer look away. They needed direct confirmation of the €1.9 billion supposedly sitting in Manila. They bypassed Marsalek. They contacted the two Philippine banks directly, BDO and BPI. We need the escrow certificates. The banks replied, these documents are forged. The money never existed. The Asian partners generating half the company's revenue were investigated. They were dead-end addresses. One of the supposed multi-million-dollar corporate hubs was a retired Siemens family home in Manila. On June 18, 2020, Wirecard announced the $1.9 billion was missing. The reality distortion field violently collapsed. The stock plummeted 60%, then 80%, then 99%. Billions of euros in retail savings were vaporized in days. While the market burned, Jan Marsalek arranged a private jet flight to Minsk and disappeared into Russia. Markus Braun was arrested. He claimed he was a victim. He claimed Marsalek had betrayed him.
But the damage was already done. Behind the staggering numbers, real lives were destroyed.
Today, as of August 2026, Markus Braun sits in a Munich courtroom. His marathon criminal trial continues to grind on. Jan Marsalek remains an international fugitive, widely believed by Western intelligence to be living in Moscow under the protection of the Russian state. They spent 10 years looking for €1.9 billion. They should have looked at what they wanted to believe. Wirecard didn't fool the world because its lies were brilliant. It fooled the world because an entire nation desperately wanted the lie to be true. He copied a playbook written 20 years earlier by a man who never got caught. To see who wrote that playbook, subscribe to Built and Broken.